The very factor in the patent on levitation, the most important factor was left out because the magnetomotive force has to do with acceleration, and that's is caused by an iron core coil, whereas an air core coil favors electromotive force, and that has to do with the neutralization of inertia, which is related to the mass. In other words, an air core coil, because then you can have high frequencies, whereas with an iron core you have to deal with low frequencies. Now, in a UFO, acceleration is not the issue. That's not the problem. In fact, you don't want too much acceleration because then you'll start to bump into stuff. If you won't be able to maneuver properly. The problem is neutralization of inertia, which has to do with mass, and that's the electromotive force. And that's the stationary reference frame. So that has to be very strong, and it has to be a high frequency. Whereas the rotating magnetic field oscillating, or if you prefer to say reciprocating along its spin axis, is a very mild thing, and so we call that the catalyst. And although it has to work in conjunction with the absolute reference frame of the electrostatic field, still it's just a catalyst. And yet it's the only element, or pair of elements, stated in the patent. The stationary electrostatic field is not stated. I have to speculate it. You know, what's left? You always have to ask yourself, what's left out of a patent? And it's that electrostatic field, stationary electrostatic field, that's the most significant element, because unless you neutralize inertia, nothing's going to happen. But once you neutralize inertia and have it match the mass of what you're neutralizing, because you have to match the mass, then you don't have to worry about current in order to motivate acceleration, except you don't want too much. Now, when you do circuits in the real world, as opposed to idealistic simulation, there's a tendency for voltage to dominate and current to lag behind when you're doing an over-unity circuit. Now, in the Vimeo video that I rewatched and inspired me to make this video, I state that a voltage-oriented coil, such as an air core coil, favors higher frequencies. While the minute you start putting an iron core into a coil, you slow down the frequency. You limit what kind of frequency range you can have. So not only do you create an electric motor capable of acceleration more so than torque, but you also have to gear down your rotation or reciprocation, as the case may be, to lower frequencies. Now, this was not necessary for Tesla to follow in 1897 if he made a reactive motor. All he needed was a reciprocating plunger to plunge a vessel of hydraulic fluid, which could then be transferred through a one-way valve system, his valvular conduit, and a baffling system to slow things down, and then to his Tesla turbine to turn that reciprocating motion into rotary motion to spin the wheels on the car, if that's what he did. We don't know what he did in 1897. We don't know even less what he did in 1931, except for maybe the Amman brothers replication. But in 1897, he might have done something else. He might have put a UFO, neutralization of inertia device in the motor, call it a motor, when all he's doing is neutralizing the mass of the motor, not the car. Or not the motors per se, but the rotor of the motor, so that he could spin it readily. And if you get the rotor to spin because he neutralized the inertial mass of the rotor, then that might be a way to get it to spin, instead of using coils to get it to spin. So that means he would have used air core coils in that rotor possibly, as well as the stator combination in his so-called custom-made electric motor, because that's all, well, that's what Peter Sava stipulated, but in Arthur Matthews, yeah, he said it was a custom-made AC motor, but Arthur Matthews didn't state anything about the motor, I don't believe I recall. Anyway, so those are some of the parameters that have to be considered when trying to wonder what goes on. But I'm trying to stick to UFOs here, not not Tesla's application of UFO technology to a motor vehicle. So electrostatics tends to favor over electromagnetics. It tends to be the case, especially at higher frequency. And that's where we're going to get over unity within a timely manner. You have to step up the frequency. Not too much. You don't have to go too high. You can keep it within 100 or 200,000 cycles per second, I find. But my simulation models were all air core coil. And that's why I got over unity. I found it helps stabilize the circuit if I put in an iron core transformer, but it played a minor role and you couldn't use it as a load. So the transformer itself is lightly loading the circuit. Of course, every component does, unless it's a negative resistor type component. Usually every component adds positive resistance to the circuit. Usually. Maybe not capacitors, but usually everything else. Or except for capacitors or spark gaps, whatever. Let me see if I can remember everything. So that's why putting a transformer in can help stabilize the circuit, but not act as a major load, certainly not a variable load. Now, it did help, and it taught me an important lesson that unless you put electromagnetics into an electrostatic-oriented circuit, you're not really dealing with a totally realistic circuit. But it doesn't have to dominate. It can be recessive. It can be very submissive and subvertive, very minor. But it serves a role. It's like, the guy who runs the Ritali website, RITALIE.com, when he charges batteries, he uses a minimum of current to satisfy Ohm's law. Otherwise, it's strictly voltage, 400 volts, I believe, to recharge a battery. So he's using a different mechanism, but I cover that in other videos, so I'm not going to go into that. But the point is, in every situation, to comply with the natural tendency of the universe, which is to follow Ohm's law by default, without any further ado, that means that if you want a voltage-oriented circuit, you do have to put current in there, but just enough to qualify the voltage, to qualify Ohm's law that, okay, you can have all the voltage you want, but you do have to have a minor amount of current to act as the glue of the adhesive of the postage stamp, so to speak, and the postage stamp being voltage, and to affix it to your letter, to make it work in the circuit, the letter being the circuit. Because you don't have current, you just have voltage dominating for the most part, Okay. So what was the point of this video? No, I forgot. It was in the beginning. Oh, shoot. Well, it was good this guy brought up a question, what video are you talking about? Where can I see more of these? And I had to go rewatch the videos, and then I got to see them in a new way. Even though I made those videos, I completely forgot what I said, but I saw something else I could have said at the time had I thought of it, but now I'm thinking of it. It always helps to watch your own material sometime later, I guess. Because we don't know how UFOs are built, right? You and I, the common person. So all we can do is speculate. So I suspect then the patent of 2018, I believe it is, that's in the first video of is.gd/UFO talk, I believe it's called, or the second video, I believe, talks about this patent that describes a rotating magnetic field and it's mechanically reciprocating along its spin axis, And that's all very well and good, but it's a minor, in terms of power, neutralization of inertia is a major deal. It's not covered by the patent. That's only the catalyst for the neutralization of inertia. And it's an important catalyst to describe it.